You're on the Six Screens Telenetwork, earning the reputation of giving all the right ingredients, uninhibited, in exposing the hard, cold facts about the Watchtower Society. And now, the end is near.
Well, hello everyone, and welcome in to the Six Screens Saturday Night Live. We have got our premiere program tonight. Barbara Anderson, Watchtower researcher, tells all. Now, you want to stay with us tonight. Barbara's been coming in and she's been sharing stories with us right here on the Six Screens that she's never really told before. So you're getting kind of a first-hand exclusive interview here with Barbara. So stay with us. Now, tonight, we know Barbara was involved in the writing department of the world headquarters of Jehovah's Witnesses. That was back when they were in Brooklyn. And Barbara was involved with the writings in the Proclaimers book. She has a lot of inside information, and she's so willing to share it with us. Now, tonight, she wants to talk about some of the dirty dealings in the writing department. Now, you look at the writing department of the Watchtower, you kind of looked at it when I was a witness as a very sacred department. Wow, this is where Jehovah's Spirit is really running hot. This is where he's guiding the writers of the Watchtower to put out meat in due season. Well, Barbara's going to disagree with that tonight. So let's bring Barbara on. And here she is. And here she is. Hello, Barbara.
Hey, Rick. Greetings from cold Tennessee.
Is it cold in Tennessee tonight?
20. Yeah, 20 degrees right now.
Well, there you go. Well, I think it's colder than it is here. It is. I know it is.
I'm killing in Massachusetts.
Well, I think things are changing. I think things are changing. I think it's getting warmer here and colder down south. But
wait a few days and when it's 0 in your place.
Yeah. In fact, I'm just curious. Let me just check my weather app on my iPhone here and see what the weather. That's how I check my weather.
Oh.
Well, it's 36 degrees here. It's 20 down there. I can't believe that. It's unbelievable.
Yeah, during the night. It might not be that right now, but it definitely is.
All right.
Tonight. And in a few days, Christmas is going to be like 6 or 8 or something like that.
Yeah. Well, we're glad to have you on here, and we're glad to have you on the Six Screens. And what I find, Barbara, is, this is valuable information that we all can gather from a person that was an insider. Now, you represent a Watchtower era that's kind of historic, but that's when the Watchtower was the Watchtower. That's when they had something going for them. Mm-hmm. What they have going now, I don't know, but it's not the same organization. So we talked this week. We're going to be talking about dirty dealings in the writing department. Of course, you were in that department. So let's start off, Barbara, and I'm going to kind of rein you in from time to time because I want the audience to really get the full impact of everything that you're saying. So you were a member. How long? What years did you serve in Bethel?
We went in June of 1982, and we left in 10 and a half years later. We were home January, at the end of December, we left 92. So for the new year, 93, we were back in Tennessee.
Well, obviously, you've seen things that, the average person would never get to see, that the workings that goes on inside the Watchtower. And, it was always mysterious, the service department, the writing department. And I can remember years ago, people used to say the most powerful department in the Watchtower was the writing department. Have you ever heard that before?
Well, yes, and it's really true, especially since the journals at the time were second largest distribution in the world. I think Reader's Digest was number 1. So the Watchtower was everywhere. And the articles were made it what it was, and that was a message of an end of the world. And what they didn't realize, of course, they didn't realize that 20, 30 years later would be practically the end of their world.
Well, in fact, it's funny. Well, not funny, but interesting to bring up. The Watchtower was right up there with Reader's Digest. But also in 1968, I believe it was, they came out with the truth that leads to eternal life. And I mean, everyone listening to the program, I believe they would know it. But that book broke records. It was in the millions. In fact, it was the most published book ever in the
That's
history of book writing. I mean, these are achievements, and we can't just look at it and say, well, phooey on that. I mean, that's quite an achievement to have the book that was the most written ever. But, what was in it was deceiving people. But anyways, it was powerful. The writing department was powerful. So now what we're going to do, we're going to be talking tonight. You and I discussed some dirty dealings. And there was even a woman, we won't mention names for her protection here tonight, unless you wanted to. But we know there was a woman in that department that just drove you up a wall, and she was trying to railroad you, whether it's through jealousy or whether it was through just had a feeling against you. Who would know? But she was not your friend. Well, so let's go into your adventure in the writing department, Barbara. Bring us right up to speed.
When we went into Bethel, there were 4,000 people within Brooklyn. So there's all kinds of folk there. And overall, I believe it operated quite well. Unless you were in a department and were there for quite a while, you really didn't see the innermost workings of it. For me, it was quite an adventure to be asked to come into writing, and the opportunity to do research, which I already was doing in engineering department at Bethel, was icing on the cake. And I said, in the beginning, I thought, oh, how Jehovah was blessing me. And when the problems began, after the worst of them were continuing, but it was sort of the end of the problem. But at that moment, I thought how wonderful I felt that I was invited into writing. I remember after I was told that, in our room, we had quite a number of years of pioneering behind us, especially my husband had. And so we had a nicer room. And in our bathroom, over the tub and shower, there was a window. And so at that time, I was so in awe of where I was going to work. And I was so grateful to Jehovah. So this sounds silly now, but, I was a true believer. And I stepped into the bathtub. I got on my knees. I looked up out of the window. It was a little higher up, and I could see the full, beautiful moon. It was a clear night. And I talked to Jehovah and thanked him. And I said, Jehovah, I don't know what I did to deserve such a blessing, and I am so happy. Well, when the situation as it unfolded and as we got nearer to the end of it, I did the same thing. And I got into that bathtub on my knees, looked out that window, and this time I said, what in the world did I do to deserve this, Jehovah? It was amazing. It was awful. To me, it was awful. And I'll start at the beginning of going into the writing department. I've told a little bit about how I got there. For some of the listeners, maybe they don't remember, but I was in engineering and the architectural part of engineering. And the building that they were proposing to build right there on the next door to the Squid buildings, or the office buildings. That proposal didn't pass the zoning, and so they wouldn't let them build it there. And they decided to know exactly what they were going to do. Well, I didn't have any work until they could get their act together for architectural. There was nothing for me to do. And so I asked the man who has made assignments for the complexes, and for maybe I could be loaned out. I knew they did that once in a while, and to another department until I had some work, and that's what he did. So I went a month into communications, and then I came out of there, and that was a hard department for me to work in. It was I was typed all day long, putting in numbers into the computer. That the numbers were for the wires. So every wire in the place had a number. And it was a cold room. There was a lot of machinery in there, and it was very difficult. But my husband told me a long time, don't complain at Bethel. So I always didn't complain. I tried to have a smile on my face. And so after the month was over, I went back to engineering, and still wasn't any work. So then I went back to the man made the assignments, and I told him. And then it wasn't too long after that he called Carl Adams, who was in the major personality in the writing department and in the organization. He called our overseer in engineering and told him that they wanted me to come in for an interview. So I did, and I got the job. So that was why I was so thrilled. And the first thing that happened was Carl Adams took me to see a young woman who was working in writing. And he told her to show me around, show me the library. I'd never been in the writing department before, as I've never been even visiting in there, so I didn't know what the layout was, and I certainly never saw their library, which was huge. And so he told her to introduce me to every writer and support person in the department. So that was her job. She was very nice. She was very beautiful, and her picture was on the back cover of the Awake a number of times. So she's probably about 30, I'd say, and married to a very fine fellow, nice looking couple. He was in the Treasury Department. He took care of the insurance, car insurance for us all. So I'd never really seen her around. As I said, there were 4,000 people. And unless you lived in the same building or ate in the same dining room, you just never saw the majority of people unless they cross your path for some reason. And I never even saw her in an elevator. So it was a new experience to meet her and most of the people in there. But so Carl left us, and she took me around and introduced me to everybody. But he left with me a sheet of paper that had questions on it. And I had to try to provide answers for those questions. I mean, sometimes they were 8, 10 questions. Some were simple, some more involved. And he wanted the answers by the following Thursday. This is every Thursday at 4:00. I had to go see him and present the answers to his questions. So after my introduction to all the folk in that department, this is the 8th floor of the 25 building where the lobby was. So I was on the 8th floor. And she asked me to see the sheet of paper to questions. And she says, I think I can help you. I guess you don't know where to start. Let me look at the paper and I'll direct you. Okay, let me give you a little bit about her background. She was assigned to a department somewhere in headquarters. I don't know where it was. And there were 50 people at the time who were in different departments, but they had what was needed to work on the insight books. I mean, they were people who did fine work, and many of them were wonderful Bible students for themselves. You know, they excelled, so they were invited to come in and work on the two. Well, back then we didn't know it would be two books, but so she was one of them. So I don't know what department she came from. So she was there for quite a while. I don't remember how long that that took to put together the inside books, the two parts, and when it was over, see, people were assigned different subjects. So, you know, that's like an encyclopedia. So it was very well coordinated, and Carl was a genius at coordination. So when they finished their part and anything else Carl wanted individuals to do, they would go back to their department. So she didn't go back to her department. She excelled in the work that she was assigned, and they decided to keep her. She was not kept to do research, which apparently she loved to do, but she was like a helper to the writers. She would do certain things. I was reviewing today some of the in my file. Actually, had some of the things that were provided to writers as far as the newspapers, and there was routing. Everybody got different newspapers, different things to read that the governing body felt necessary. And remember, we had 3 governing body members who overseers of writing. And so it was her job to do that, to coordinate the routing of newspapers and magazines. And the men would go through these things in the morning, first thing, and then she would pick it up and take it to the next person, or they would deliver it to maybe the man next door in the office next door. So she's like a fetch it person, but she's very valuable. And anything she worked on, she did a lot of copying for the men. She had insight into things that perhaps that they asked her to do. And there was no complaints about her, that's for sure. I'd see her often working around the library. And even though she was not the librarian, and the librarian was one of the senior writers, and he had an assistant. But so that's what she did. I'm sure she did other things. I just don't know. At Bethel, you didn't go around asking people what they did, especially if you were in service and writing, and everything's confidential. So you didn't ask the people, well, what book are you working on? That was absolutely a no-no. And so we all knew better to keep to ourselves what we were doing, and people didn't ask. So with me, though, she was there as an assistant to help me get around and get used to the standards of the writing department, the way everything operated. And she was very helpful. So the first day when she looked at the list of questions from Carl, there was one about a booklet, and it was published by the Society in 1922, but they didn't have a copy of it. They had, the archives had, they knew it was published, but there was no copy. And they figured that maybe I could find a copy. Well, I'm at Bethel confined to engineering, so I really was not well versed in the publishing end, or the factory end, or those at the offices who coordinated with the factory and perhaps talked about booklets. But nobody seemed to know about this, neither the librarian or his assistant. So she said, I think I know where you will find this. And she said it was on the 9th floor, there was a large office, and it was Freddie Franz's office. And Freddie no longer was working. He was in the infirmary full time. He lived there, and he was blind. They take a tape machine every so often over to him and ask him his opinions on things to make him feel needed, is what I was told. But he had insight. And so they would record his answers. And so hopefully some of that made it into the literature. Back then, that's the way we felt.
Well, we'll take a little break here for you, just to slow down a little bit. I just want to make sure the audience is right on track and following you.
Yep. First day, I go to Freddie Franz's office. That's the story.
All right. Well, we're going to get into Freddie Franz's office here very shortly, and I want you to tell the audience what you told me yesterday when we were talking. But what we have here is Barbara Anderson. Let me just give a little recap, because we have a lot of people coming in now. What we have is Barbara Anderson is on the line with us. We know Barbara Anderson. She's a Jehovah's Witness, ex-Jehovah's Witness activist speaking out against the Watchtower. Barbara has witnessed an awful lot. She worked at the world headquarters of Jehovah's Witnesses. And she's on here tonight, and she's talking about her adventures in the writing department. Now, she's specifically talking about a woman that was in the writing department that was creating some friction for Barbara. And it got to be a little ugly, as we will continue this story. But what is fascinating here is we had Freddie Franz. Now, Fred Franz, as we all knew, he was one of the presidents of the Watchtower. And he really threw a lot of weight around. And Barbara, when we pick up the program next, you went into his office, but tell the people how you got in there. Tell them where Freddie was at the time. I think people would like to hear that. And then some of the things that you found in Freddie Franz's office. That would be very fascinating to our audience. So I'll step out and let you go on. Okay, Bob, go ahead.
When I went to the 9th floor, that's the art department. And that's where Freddie had a large office. He was unconventional. You would think the oracle for the organization would be on the writing department floor, but not Freddie. He loved the art part of the organization. He was curious into everything. So when I went to the department, I had to go to a fellow who was sitting at a desk. Just as you get out of the elevator is a lobby on each floor, and then you go through the double doors and you're in the art department. The same thing in the writing and graphics and so forth. So on the different floors. So I had to go see him, And I asked him, I was told by this gal, her first name was Debbie. And Debbie said that I would have to get the key because Freddie's office was closed up. The drapes were drawn and the door was locked. But it was left just the way it was when he left it, when he went to the infirmary to live. He was completely bedridden at that time. So I asked for the key from the receptionist, a man, and he wanted to know why I wanted it. So I had to explain what I was doing, and that I felt that that this is part of where I might find in Fred's office, where appeared in his library, in his office was huge, that this booklet could be there. So he gave me the key, but I noticed it was not willingly. In fact, so I don't want to get ahead of myself. So I opened the drapes, and it was just fascinating to see the quality, the quantity of the books and the literature he had. I took every book. I believe he had a few hundred books in there. And he had all the Watchtowers leather bound from the very first to the one at that time, the last one at that year. And so that was 1990. He would have had up to 1990. And even though the experience, the finale of my experience in this case was in November of 91. So the books were there for me to look at, and I pulled every one of them off. It took me, I believe, 2 days, and took every one off the shelf, shook them, looked through them, put them back, and continued on. I noticed that if even though this was not a pleasant experience as a whole, it did have its benefits, because otherwise, how would I know what was in Freddie's office?
Yeah, let's just stop there for a second, Barb. What's fascinating to me, I mean, this was really something that not many people got to go into Fred Fran's office. Am I right saying that?
Oh, absolutely. And it was, like I said, it was locked. And he had a desk in there that he used when he had been in that office, that belonged to the man who started this whole thing, Russell.
Russell, well, now let me just bring this up at this point. Now, going into his office and you working there at the Watchtower, and of course you were told to go there. You were told that you needed to get something off of the bookshelf. Tell us, did you feel scared? Did you feel, boy, I got to be very careful here?
No. I was thrilled, just absolutely thrilled. I loved every moment of it. It was a file cabinet there, and I got to go through his file cabinet. That was interesting, to say the least. That's where I saw letters from Rutherford to Freddie.
Well, tell us about some of those letters. Were they in any way like if people heard about them, it would create issues for people in the Watchtower? I mean, what was the content of some of the letters? Can you remember?
Oh, it was miscellaneous, but I remember, because I was so interested in this particular thing, that I never forgot it. And that was Rutherford's letters to Freddie, instructing him what to write in Rutherford's name. It was absolutely there. And so much of what so-called Rutherford wrote was written by Freddie. And Rutherford was a lawyer. He wasn't a biblical scholar, as Freddie portrayed himself. So that made sense. I'm not saying that I think everything was written by Freddie, but Freddie went into the service department when it was new. I forgot to look it up, but I think it was 1924, 26 or something. And so Rutherford used Freddie as his personal, I would call him his sage, and he was the main writer over the years. In fact, there was a part in some of the older watchtowers which said Rutherford speaks. And there was one letter that told Freddie, said exactly what I want you to write under under Rutherford speaks this subject. So that was conclusive to me. Now, that's not unusual. This isn't mind-boggling.
So just to get this clear now, Rutherford evidently, before he died, he had information that he would like to have published, but of course he died and it couldn't happen. So we call that he evidently was looking for Freddie to kind of
he died in 42, so they had a good relationship for since the mid-20s, and Freddie actually knew Russell, and so that was a claim to his fame.
Right. But I mean, would Rutherford want Freddie to publish these things? They call it post-authamy. In other words, after he died, was Freddie?
No, I don't think so. Those books, remember the Rainbow series of books that Rutherford put out? That's what they're called, the Rainbow, because the books had different covers,
right?
Colors of covers. They look like a rainbow on every sort of subject: sovereignty, children. You remember all of those?
Oh, sure.
Freddie had a lot to do with all of that. Everybody, Rutherford took all the credit for all of that. But that's just really is an interesting side point. That's not unusual in the publishing world. But Rutherford claimed to be as much an oracle as Freddie.
Well, while you were in Fred Fran's office, and he had his own like big bookcase in there with all kinds of books on it. Well, I mean, I don't know if you can remember some of the books that you were looking through, but I mean, obviously they weren't all Watchtower publications. Well, what were some of the books? Can you remember?
Well, he had commentaries, absolutely. And the instructions were to us all not to use commentaries. Freddie had access, of course, to the Watchtower library, but I never saw him, although he was, as I said, he was sick at that point in his life. But he basically was in the art department, and he had a fantastic library, and he had friends all over the world that sent him books. I know that. What I found so fascinating, especially years later, when I knew what he had, and years later I began to see where a lot of this came from. Freddie's library was full of Protestant Reformation material. I happen to have a lot of that myself nowadays because I did inherit it from someone who has been deceased for years. But when he died, I was given his library, and I have the type of things that Freddie had, and that is on the Puritans. The religion, Jehovah's Witness, I've said it before and I'll say it again. It's a rerun religion. It's basically from the Puritan Pilgrim era. And they were searching back at that time, getting away from the Catholic Church. They were searching for primitive Christianity. And Freddie was following that same track. And so a lot of the things that Freddie came up with was research from olden times. And that one thing I saw was that on the statement on the, I said this a few weeks ago about the DD after the names of clergymen and of the Puritan era. And it was Freddie who at assembly said the DD didn't stand for, let's see, can't think of what. It didn't stand for divinity, the clergyman's title. Freddie said it stood for dumb dogs. Actually, I saw that. Now that's a clue to me years later, because I saw where he picked that up from. He picked it right up out of a publication that came out during the Protestant Reformation.
Well, let's stop right there for a second. You got my ears perked up here. You're talking about Friends and interested in the Pilgrims and Puritan way of thinking. I mean, I'm from Massachusetts. I mean, there's probably no more of a Puritan history here than here. That this is where the Puritans came. They landed in Plymouth, Massachusetts, and I've been down there and actually toured it a couple of times. And come to find out, I mean, I did realize I was never taught this in history lessons in school, but I learned it going down there and watching some of their videos and listening to their curators, that the Puritans were leaving Europe, England particularly. They were leaving there because they weren't accepted. They were like a cult in themselves.
Yes.
So they were trying to find religious freedom. So they got on the Mayflower, as history says, and they landed here in Massachusetts, where they Plymouth Rock and all of that. We learned all about that. But to make a long story short, I never realized they were a cult. They were considered a cult. So that's fascinating that Franz was looking into that. That got my ears perked up, Barbara. Yeah.
Okay. Actually, I just thought about it too, that the DD stands for Doctor of Divinity. Yeah. And so he said, and I can actually, if I'd have thought about it earlier, I'd have looked it up, because I found it. I found where he got the quote from, and what clergymen back centuries, they said the same thing. All he did was Russell was looking for primitive Christianity, and they were reading the old books. The books were coming in from England, and Russell was into them just as much as educated people in the America were at that time, in that century, the 19th century, that were examining all this. The Millerites, they were examining the Adventists, this very extraordinary time period of a movement away from the Catholic Church. And so there was so much in the way that Freddie was presenting that was really old stuff that he made new.
Yeah.
And that was fascinating.
Well, what we want to do now, we won't want to get too far off base. Yeah. We want to go back to the writing department. You were in Freddie Fran's office. You had an assignment. You get some information there. Now, that led to some trouble for you.
Yes, it did.
That led to some trouble, as you and I discussed. So let's get back on that.
I don't know why I'm smiling, because I wasn't smiling back then. I was fascinated by this whole thing, and you put I'm from a generation of people who you start working and you never stop. You just go for it. It was like a whole new world to me, and so I'm walking on air, and I get called by Carl Adams to come to his office. It was after 2 days. I wrote up what I found. I never found that booklet. I found a lot of old stuff, but not that particular booklet. So Carl was not happy with me when I walked in his office. It was very obvious that I pulled a bad one. Why? And he said, I hear you were in Freddie's office. And I said, yeah, I was. I was wonderful. He said, why did you go there? And so I said, well, I figured that after Debbie told me that would be a good place to start, because Freddie would have everything. And he said, well, he had a phone call from the man who sat at the front desk, who was wondering why I was there, even though I tried to explain. And he was not particularly happy, because Carl should have told him that I was coming. You have to do things in a certain way. And for me to just do that on my own, that was a no-no. So I explained, and he simmered down. I mean, he didn't bless me out, but he just said he was annoyed. He didn't smile at all. And he said, you are never to do anything like that again. You clear things with me, and on and on. And so he said, well, you go back to work. Well, I thought about this later about what happened in his office. Because you see, I told him that Debbie was responsible for me to go there. And I wasn't blaming her. I was just saying, she looked at the paper. She said, that's where to start. So he knew at that point that I didn't come up with that decision. I'm new. But he didn't say a word to make me feel better. And why should he anyway? But he was a kind of he was a very serious man. His brothers, Don Adams and Joel Adams, they weren't like him. He was all work. They were, they had a sense of humor. I all the time I knew Carl, he rarely ever smiled. He took it very seriously, everything very seriously, and that's okay. He was one of the, and you ask anybody in those years, Carl Adams talks at Bethel were extraordinary. He was one of the best speakers, and he gave us deep information, knowledge on subjects when he spoke on a Monday night after the Watchtower. Once a month we would have these special lectures. So I admired him, and I felt privileged to be working with him. So I went back to my work and started following all the leads I could. It was a particularly extraordinary time when to find the kind of places that I could go and do the research. One day I had a call from a fellow in the Treasury, and he was a secretary to Swingle. And he told me that if I wanted to find extraordinary things about the early organization, that I should ask about getting into the Monmouth walk-in safe. And I talked about this before, and that was where I found the first account book that Russell kept that had the person as different as first president of the association. I've talked all about that before. But
well, let's get now what we want to do now. We don't want to get too far off base.
No, so I'm having a great time. Let's go to that. Okay.
All right. So let me just recap here what's going on. I just want the audience, because Barbara, you have so much to share but I know it'd be like me. I want to tell it all, but we're going to have plenty of time here. We're going to get you coming on more often and telling your story. But you left Fran's office. You went back to Adam's
And
office
that was 2 days later where I,
2 days later. So he was kind of not happy that you went into Fran's office. He knows that it was pretty much off base for people to go into, so he didn't get too mad at you. But I'm thinking now, was someone deliberately trying to get you in trouble? I mean, why would they have you go in there? Is it, when you and I talked the other day, can we bring this woman back into the equation?
well, she was just part of my life there. The year uh, with her working was uneventful with her. We associated, and
Is she the one that told you to go there?
yes, of course, she was the one who recommended I go there, and Carl knew that. So I didn't do this. It wasn't my idea. I didn't even know where Freddie's office was. So she made the suggestion. I thought, she's been here for a while. She knows her way around. And why would I even suspect anything? This is my sister. And she's been in writing. At that time, I think she was a year there. So it was fine. I'd see her and we'd chat for a little bit. She was very friendly to me. I looked at her as like a daughter. I'm at that point I was had an adult son, so she seemed to be a happy girl. She had a really lovely husband. They seemed like the perfect couple. You would never, I would never ever think anything else about this gal.
So
And
what we're trying to establish here tonight, and as you and I talked about it, and I'm glad you expressed it the way you did as we talked this week, that, sometimes people think the Watchtower is so pristine, pure, and clean, and God's Holy Spirit, but they're humans too. And there's a lot of inadequacies and dirty dealings that go on at the Watchtower as well. And we're going to put this woman in that category. She was really trying to hurt you, Barbara. So go ahead and continue on. Yep.
you made a good point there when you said, think about it so clean. Over the years of being at headquarters, that's the one thing that people were always so impressed with. And those that operated the homes and kept the factories clean and the offices, it was always an important thing to have everything sparkling, clean. And people to this day who I've talked to who visited Bethel years ago said, it represented the kingdom, the cleanliness, as everything shined. And behind that, it appears to me as years later and as a no longer looking at the organization with the eyes of worship that I had back then as an older person. I could see through that now. That was all a front. And the men themselves were very impressed. Those who ran the place, they were extremely impressed with themselves to keep everything smoothly running, that this is Jehovah's organization, so it's clean. Do you remember in the magazine or the Kingdom Ministry years ago where we all heard about our cars in the ministry? We better keep them clean. We represent Jehovah's organization, the clean organization. Well, it wasn't always just morals. It was everything. But behind the glistening walls and furniture and everything, it was just like every place else. It had its flaws, but they didn't want the flaws because that would throw a monkey wrench into the whole idea of Jehovah's organization directed by Holy Spirit had to be different than every place else. Well, I've been in big buildings in New York City that were just as clean, but this was obsessive, and so the people were like that. Put on a smiling face, no matter how awful you felt, no matter what your problems were. Don't talk about them. Don't gossip. Keep putting up with one another. We heard that always, putting up with one another. And that's the mark of a true Christian. Well, that tells you that if you got to keep putting up with one another, there's a message in that itself, I think.
Well, there is. And in fact, it's very fascinating when we did discuss these things this week. And we do have a lot of people coming in right now. We have Barbara Anderson on with us. Well, she is a woman that knows where the bones are buried at the Watchtower.
Some of them.
Yeah,
There's
she's
plenty.
yeah, well, she's talking here tonight about the writing department. And, you know, we always, as witnesses, oh, it's so wonderful. Boy, Barbara, I would have loved to have heard this when I was getting out of the organization. This really would have reinforced my thinking. But we always looked at the organization as being so organized and so pristine, clean, and well behaved. But there were dirty dealings going on. Now, you were in the writing department, and there was a woman in there that was really pushing your buttons. I mean, this
Well,
woman,
she didn't then. She pushed him. Boy, did she push him later on. But
yeah.
you know,
Well, so let's get up to speed now.
it was like a facade. See, that's what I'm talking about. The whole thing is a facade. The cleanliness, the smiling faces, the people in headquarters are just people, but they couldn't show it. If you showed it, you were out.
Yeah.
If you became a problem to the organization, you were spoken to. And if you repeated something that they didn't care for your attitude or conduct or humanness, you were asked to leave. That's why they started that first year. You could be there 7 months, they would interview you. And we got in there permanent from the very beginning. We were permanent because of my husband. And but generally speaking, you're there for only a year. They interview us 7 months, and you tell them you don't like it or you like it, and they tell you what they don't like about you or what they like about you, or they keep you.
Well, I'm sure there's plenty of people that go into Bethel that are flunkies.
Oh yeah.
And they're not really good workers, and goodness only knows why they're there in the first place. Maybe they were coerced into getting in there. But what the Watchtower would do, like any good company, like General Motors or Apple company, they would find the best of the best. So, you know, Joe was very valuable to them, and having the knowledge that he had in plumbing and building the project that they had going. And you were no dummy girl. You had your feet on the ground. You could walk and chew gum at the same time. So they saw you as valuable. So they wanted to keep you. It wasn't like some of the other people there. So you were kind of put in a different position. But what happened? I'm just thinking out loud. I don't know. I wasn't there. But this woman that kind of was getting on your nerves, and not kind of, but was getting on your nerves. I can see that if she was in the writing department, as you say, Barbara, let me ask you, were there many women in the writing department?
No, not really. Just a few support women. That's all. Generally, majority were men. I was the only one in the entire department that was a parent. So I was useful to many people who would pick my brain about being a parent because they were writing articles on that.
Well, the thing is, would it be safe to say that some of the other women were just, well, the term is gophers. I mean, I'm not using it in a disrespect.
Well, some of the ones who edited their circuit overseers' wives, who were quite intelligent, and they were in doing that for years. They really knew their stuff. And of course, the Watchtower has a standard book, and they had to go by that. But you really had to know language, and of course, they were working with English. I remember going in to that office where the girls were, really fine with a fine-tooth comb going over manuscripts, and they would do correcting and whatever. And I asked, I was there for a reason, of course. But while I was there, I asked the one who actually my husband knew her, and her husband, who was in circuit work, he knew them from years before when he lived in Dallas, and he was pioneering. That was in the 50s, and they were a young couple starting out in the circuit work. He was a congregation servant, and eventually they went in the circuit work, and eventually they were called to Bethel. And so I felt at ease with her, and I asked her the question about are they, because I'm working on the Proclaimers book on the history of the organization. I was nosy, and I said, are they going to put that in the Proclaimers book that that the Russells had a celibate marriage? And she said, oh, no, they're not going to put that in. That will stumble many people. The governing body made that decision. I mean, this is the kind of things these people do, and so behind the scenes.
Just before you go any further, did Russell and Maria have a celibate marriage?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they did.
Yeah.
All right.
Well, they said they did, and everything points to it. So what are you going to do? I'm old, but I wasn't there.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's get back on track now. But I'll tell you what, you got the audience intrigued.
This is life. It was
well,
life.
you're showing us at the writing department now. You had women in there, but a lot of the women now, I can understand back in the 80s they didn't have the technology that they have today.
Yeah,
so when you're writing articles, you have to have people go get certain books and certain publications and reference points and bring it back to us here so we can study it. So a lot of these people were like, you'd call them gophers, just go in between. But I mean, you really, put the pedal to the metal. They had you right in there writing on this. So do you think that's what's caused some jealousy with this woman that didn't like you?
Well, she it came out later, she really was capable of doing the work I did. And she was, I can't find fault with her skills. It was something else that was eating her alive. And what became of her, I don't know. But what happened was, I thought everything was running smoothly for that year that I knew her. And one day, the man who did research, we did the research. He would get us the stuff we needed. And if we needed books, he went in every Wednesday to the 42nd Street Library, and he would get the books. The writers would ask for things, and he coordinated that. Although he was not the overseer of research, he was second in command. And the man who was overseer of the research, rarely ever saw him. I knew his name, but I never saw him up to that point. He stayed in his office. He wasn't married. And from what I gather, at that point, I didn't even know he was over the fella who was doing the actual work and going there to Manhattan. He was the one who went to the United Nations every Wednesday. And that was Ciro. And so what Ciro would do on Wednesday, he would put a note on the door of his office, and he'd say, gone to New York. Well, that meant everybody, if you want to see Ciro, today's Wednesday, and he's not here. So this particular Tuesday before Wednesday, he calls me on the phone, and Debbie, she always took his calls on Wednesday. So he would forward his phone to her phone, and his phone rang frequently. And so she made the notes, took the messages for him, and then on Thursday, she would take him all his messages and explain this or that or whatever happened. She was very good at what she did. And she just didn't write a name down. She'd find out information there because they were information people. So he calls me and he said, I've got some special information coming in. It's to do with what you are working on. And I want you to answer my phone. Like I said, this was Tuesday. So he says, Wednesday, I'm forwarding my phone to you. And when this call comes in, I don't know when it's coming in, I want you to further the conversation about this particular project. And I was involved with that project. So it was the right thing to do. So I could see no problem with that. So I took the messages, and then on Thursday I went in. I got all this ready and to take to him. And when I got there, I mean, his office wasn't that far from mine. I had really a big shock. And he was extremely upset. And so Debbie had just left his office, and she had inquired why he didn't get any phone calls the day before. So he said Barbara took them. I forwarded my phone over to Barbara. There was no reason why he had to explain to anybody. And I mean, that's just the way it was. People, like I said, we didn't talk about what we did to everybody. So you said the least amount of stuff. So he said, I forwarded it to Barbara. She then, he told me, began to come unglued and started to scream and emotionally had a breakdown. And she kept saying to him, why did you do that? Why did you give it to her? Don't you know that? Then she started to criticize me. And she said that nobody liked me on the floor. That they would like to get rid of me. And at that point, I was doing work on at that point, my office had moved. And as I said, my office previously was very close to his, but this particular, I'm just remembering, I was on the 9th floor. And that's when I was finished the Proclaimers. I finished the other big project I was on, 6-month project tracing the channel from Jesus to Russell. So I was over all of that. The end of the road came for me in writing. And I didn't know this. At this point, I find out Lloyd Berry calls me to his office. Now, I don't want to lose people here. So
let's stop right there for a second, okay? Let's just stop and take a deep breath. Let me just kind of recap so the audience can follow this.
Yeah.
Now, we have Barbara talking about her experiences in the writing department of the Watchtower. Now, the woman that was kind of getting you railroaded or didn't like you, her name was Debbie. Is that correct?
Well, I never knew she didn't like me until this experience of him forwarding it.
All right. Well, I'm going to explain that to the audience, but her name was Debbie. Is that correct?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
All right. So now Debbie was the one that would take Ciro Alessino's calls he'd forward the calls to Debbie when he was doing something else. Now, just for the record, Ciro Alessino, he worked in the writing department, right?
Of course, for
Okay, he was a head guy there, right? I
it,
know. He was
at
pretty,
one point he wrote for the Watchtower,
yeah.
uh,
All
uh,
right.
but not
So,
at this point.
so we have Ciro that was forwarding his calls to Debbie, and she felt pretty important over that.
Well,
But
the
also,
other men did too. It wasn't just Ciro, but she felt very important with Ciro's because it was part of the research stuff,
right.
and that's what she loved is
All right.
research.
So now all of a sudden, one day he says, "No, I'm going to have Barbara, you, to take the calls." And I mean, that really infuriated her.
The day after, because she
Yeah.
wondered why she didn't get any calls, and he got plenty of calls during the day.
So she went into Ciro's office, and evidently, you're saying there was a lot of arguing and yelling and screaming going on.
She had a breakdown, and
Yeah.
she was screaming when she found out that he had calls, but he put his phone forward to mine on the 9th floor, which then I was transferred there because I was doing something different, and Lloyd Berry put me there, and so it was on the. It was important to say this because see, when I came into writing, I thought I was permanent there. Nobody ever said anything to me about I wasn't. Lloyd Berry, when I finished Proclaimer's book, he said, you're finished. Normally, we would send you back to engineering where we borrowed you from. And I just listened. He said, we're going to keep you. He said, your work was so well done, and we need you. And we want to put your office on the 9th floor, which was fabulous. I got a fabulous office. It was facing the East River, and my other one was an inner office on the 8th floor. And so he said, and you're going to work with Audrey Knorr, and I want you to set up a thesaurus, and you work with her on filling the gaps of we have thousands of pictures and so forth, and she knows all these people from years ago, and she's here now with her husband who was ill.
All right, but now we're jumping ahead now.
No, I have to build this up because to see this was important. I wasn't seeing Debbie anymore. I was up on the next floor. I was working with
Well, I want you to tell the audience what we talked about yesterday, and how you went into one of the head guys' office, one of the head men at the Watchtower's office, and he told you how she was. Well, you go ahead and tell us that story.
Okay, so
she wanted to have some tea. Yeah.
I went down to. I'm getting it there. I went down to Ciro's office and took him his phone messages. When I did, Ciro told me that Debbie had been there inquiring about his messages, why she didn't get any for him. And when he told her, she started to scream and cry and blame everything on me, that now I stole her job. I have taken away her job, even on the phones. And he said that she claimed that she didn't even want me near her, didn't want me to come to her office, that that nobody liked me on the floor. The reason I was on the put me on the 9th floor was to get rid of me. And it was awful. And I listened to what he told me, and I could have cried. I couldn't believe that anybody would say what she was saying. And I thought, well, maybe that's so. Maybe my personality is like that. How do I know? And the few sisters that were there, they were older. They were doing flunky work and filing type of thing. And I knew them. And they were always so polite to me. And we could chat. And she was saying that they hated me. And so Cyril was absolutely beside himself. He didn't know what to do. I went back to my office and I could have cried. I probably did. And but Sarah went to see his overseer, who had been in Bethel for many years. People didn't even know he existed at Bethel, but he was a somebody. And that's the thing about Bethel. You never knew who was extremely important, more so than the governing body is importance to the organization. Well, that's what this guy was. He actually, in the world, worked for NASA before he became a witness, way back in those years. And he was brilliant, and he was he was a factory between the Watchtower factory and the writing department. And he ran all kinds of things. He was so important. I didn't even know he was there. And he never came out of his office when I was there. I never saw him in the library. I had to go see him. Sarah went to him. And next thing I know, I get a phone call from this man. He tells me to come to his office, which was right there by the library. And so I went there and met a man I had never met before. And here I'm at Bethel at that point, 7 years. And then he asks me about my impression of Debbie, and he says that she did this, she said that, whatever. And I was just a state of shock, and I was not emotional, that's for sure. I don't cry. I handle situations. It's just what you do when you get older. You know how to I've been in business over the years. I know how to handle myself. So we had a good discussion. But he didn't give me information. That's for sure. He was adding information. And so when I went back to my office, I decided to write Debbie a letter.
Wait a minute. Let's stop right here. Now, we don't want to go back to the office yet. You mentioned to me this week. What did that man say?
No, that was later. That was after it was all over. No,
all right, I want to hear what the man said about Debbie coming in and wanting to have some tea with him.
No, that's later.
Okay,
because that doesn't fit right here. That was a revelation to the ending of this.
All right, so you went back to your office now, and
I wrote her a letter, which I sent you.
I got the letter. Yeah,
that's right.
Do you want to read part of the letter? Or?
Sure.
Well, let's see what it is. I mean, let me put it up here. Let me see if we can't get it up here. It's here somewhere. I did have it earlier, but if not, do you have a copy in front of you?
Absolutely.
Well, why don't you read a portion of it? Read a little bit of it anyways, okay? In fact, you read a little bit of it. That might be good. Yep.
I said, Dear Debbie, this letter is being written with a heavy heart and a troubled spirit. It has taken many days of soul searching and prayer to try to determine what to do in this matter that I am about to bring to your attention. For the sake of peace and the restoration of harmony between us, I determined that I should write you about what I consider a very serious problem, that you could have time to think about what appropriate action we should take. Recently, it was brought to my attention that you are very upset with me, so much so that you stated that you do not want me in your office. Since you and I work in the same department and I'm doing research for the image library and for departmental projects as needed, it is imperative that we put to rest anything that will hinder our respectfully and smoothly working together. When reflecting back on our 2-year relationship in the department, I really don't know what I did that has caused you to express yourself about me in such a strong way, as it was stated to me that you did. But for the sake of our relationship to our Heavenly Father, it's very important that we talk about this. I really need to find out what this is all about, and if needed, apologize to you if I've seriously offended you in some way. Of course, Debbie, I realize if the person that told me how badly you feel about me has not been accurate in any of his statements, it's important for you to defend your good name. And I know this is what you will want to do. As of now, this is a very delicate situation. If we don't settle this problem concerning what you are supposed to have said about me, then I'm under a great deal of strain worrying about all of this. If you are innocent of the statements that are attributed to you about me, then you will most likely want to get to the bottom of this and help to try to clear up this situation. If I'm guilty of something so awful that you don't want me near you, that as my Christian sister, you need to allow me to right the wrong. I hope you see that this needs to be discussed as soon as possible. I'm also taking this opportunity to ask you to think very carefully where you heard that Carl was very dissatisfied with my work and got rid of me. I now have heard this twice and wonder who originated this slanderous statement. I took the liberty of seeing Carl last Thursday to discuss this matter with him. When I was transferred from the 8th to the 9th floor because my work for Carl was complete, Carl discussed the transfer with me, and so did Brother Barry. I was commended on my work and was told that because I did an excellent job, I was now permanently in the writing department. It was very difficult for me to go in to see Carl Thursday and ask him if he was now saying the opposite about me. Carl denied that he ever said such a thing. I'm mentioning this to you because I believe that you should be aware of the seriousness of this rumor and perhaps help us to find out where it is coming from. I also want to hear from you if you did indeed repeat it. Is it also true that you said that no one likes me or wants to work with me on the 8th floor? Can you understand why my spirit groans when I hear that my Christian brothers are saying these things about me? Why isn't anyone coming to me if they feel so strongly against me? If you did indeed say these things, then please come and talk to me about this. If you didn't, please come and tell me so. I wish I could say that this is the first time that I've heard that you have said something that troubled me greatly, but it is not. I have tried to overlook this and be friendly to you, but I see now that this has to be discussed because the situation is only going from bad to worse. I have mentioned some of the most serious statements that you supposedly have made, but there were also some others that deeply wounded me. I certainly cannot rest well until I hear your side. Debbie, biologically speaking, I could be your mother, and I have thought of you like a daughter. You are a lovely young woman who I greatly admire. You look smashing, carry yourself well, and as far as I can see, do a wonderful job with your work. Often when I see something that you have been involved with, I marvel at how beautifully it is done. How could I have supposedly hurt someone this badly so that I am no longer welcome in her office, especially someone who I've always liked so much? It's a question I keep asking myself. May we get together at your convenience with a spirit of love and mildness and see if we can sort all of this out. That's the letter. She was put in a bad spot because then during this time, before I composed this letter and the few days that had happened, she had to appear before different men in the department and to hear what she had to say. And of course, Cyril spoke well of me and spoke about her. And it was a awful time. So she knew she was in trouble, and she did come to my office. And what she told me, I began to see what it was. She said that I got all of the good work. I was the one who she wanted to do what I was doing. And she said, and she's crying. And she says, what you did, the last thing you did was you started to work for Harry Poloyan. And that was my assignment. I did his copying. And one evening when I was here and you were here late, you were copying on the copy machine. And I asked you, who were you doing the work for? And you said Harry Poloyan. And she said, that was the straw that broke the camel's back. You now were doing his work, and it was my assignment. Well, what she didn't know was I was doing something different and special that's why I was there on my time. And I was doing something special for Harry Poloyan. And it had to do with an article that he had, it was supposed to go in the Awake, and it was problematic. And it was put together by a writer at the Irish branch. And he wanted a mature woman to read the article this man wrote, and preferably someone in my circumstances with my history. He wouldn't have gone to her with this letter. It was It was a delicate situation. And he was asking me to do double research on this to see if what this man was saying. It was an article about women and women's vicissitudes and health problems and all kinds of stuff like that. Also, it had to do with abortion. And so he asked me if I would help with this on my own time. And I said, sure. So I was doing research on my own time and I was making copy. And I never tell what I'm doing. Nobody tells what other people at the department or anywhere in Bethel what you're doing. So she got it wrong. And that was, and when Sarah's phone was going to me instead of her, she just went crazy. Well, she must have been had emotional problems. She must have had problems, period. So after this was over, towards the very end of all this, she was removed from the department, and they put her with her husband. As I said, he was in working on car insurance and whatever. And I was told that they put her with him so he could watch her. Like, I mean, it was so demeaning to say this. They didn't have any mental health care at Bethel at the time. And it was it wasn't right. The whole mess wasn't right in the sense of how they handled it, which is the same thing with child abuse. It was how they handled it. And so after she was gone, and by the way, they were at Bethel only a few more months, and then they left Bethel. I found out later that she was raised by a maiden aunt, and so not by her parents. And she was molested as a child. That's why she was at her aunt's. The psychological problems that this young woman had to deal with were tremendous. And I apparently was, I appeared as someone who was threatening to her happiness, and it didn't. She just fell apart. So now back to the tea that you mentioned, the tea. So now, if you want to say something there, say it, because I'm going to drink some water.
Okay, you can take a little break. So this is good. Now we got people listening in. We got a number of platforms they're on. But Barbara, it goes to show you that even at the Watchtower World Headquarters, there's always issues. People will be people. And I mean, there's dirty dealings that go on at the Watchtower as well as other companies. But I mean, the Watchtower, you wouldn't expect this. This is God's pure organization. So this woman was out to get you.
It was, I forgot to even say, during that year, well, it's in here, it says 2 years, but that 1 year that I really got to know her. Okay. So that was the second year. So anyway, what was happening to me was I would get books out of the library, writing department library. I had to sign them out. I would go take them to my office, and a few days later, I'd reach for the book. I'd look all over, it was gone. This happened a number of times. My books were disappearing. I had a large sheet of paper, huge, like an accounting. Years ago, we had the big accounting books and journals. And so this was a sheet like that. And it was from the 40s. It was put together in the 40s. And it was the Secretary Treasurer then who put this material together. He went back to Russell's Day, and every single year, it was a year, and it had every placement of the organization, how many people were affiliated with it. Carl gave me that for one project, and that disappeared out of my office. So I went to Carl and I told him I can't find that. Well, he wasn't too happy with me over that. And he said, you better take better care of your stuff. I said, well, maybe it got caught into other books that I had on my desk. And so he said, well, this is very difficult. I said, well, where did you get it? So I can get another one. He said, well, I got it from my brother, Don Adams. And of course, Don was president of the Watchtower of Pennsylvania. And so I decided to go. This is before I knew what Debbie was up to. And so I went to see Don, and I told him that I misplaced what Carl gave me, and Carl got it from you, and it's very important, and what am I going to do? And Don gave me a copy of it. He said, oh, no sweat. And he went in his drawer and pulled out another copy and gave it to me. And so I had an interesting, it was great because I got to meet and sit in Don Adams' office and talk to him. And that was a fascinating experience because that was the day he got the phone call from the Justice Department. And some witness worked there, and she was reporting in information from the Justice Department to the Watchtower, which is illegal to do. And he was telling me all about that. So I got every time something crazy happened to me, I find a good part about it, about how things worked at Bethel. So anyway, I told Carl I had the sheet, and he went, oh, well, that's good. Yeah, he was the one hardly ever smiled. It was his brothers that were the personalities. So anyway, I couldn't account for books. I had to tell the librarian I didn't have those books. They would disappear from my office. Well, Debbie was taking them. She would go into my office after hours. She had a key to the offices. And because of her, what she did after hours there, and she put stuff on the desk. A lot of these people didn't go to meetings. They worked. They'd go back after they ate and go back to their offices and work in the writing department, and probably others. I don't know. So, yeah, she was responsible for that. Yeah, maybe that's a part of why maybe people would be disgusted with me. I never heard anything from them. But who knows what they were saying. But she wanted me out of there. Why? That was the thing. So after this was over, I had a talk with Carl. And this is what he told me. He said, when she was, we kept her here. She did very, very well after the Insight books. And her job was well done. He said we couldn't have been happier with her. Then this opening came up on the Proclaimers book, but they didn't have a name for it then, on the history book. And she wanted that job. That was the way it was. And I knew she wanted this job. He said, and you got it. And he said, that's the beginning of this. That's why she directed you to Freddie Francis' office, because she wanted you to get in trouble. Well, remember, I told him that she directed me. He didn't clue me in that there was trouble. He let that go by. He never thought ahead, which that's the way some people are. That if she would have done that to me on my first day there, she don't want me around. She wanted my job. And then I said to him, why didn't you give her the job? She was so good at what she did. And now this is what you were saying about the tea. This is really the silliest, dumbest thing I had heard. And, but it's a sheltered life. Bethel's a sheltered life. And he'd been there since the 40s. So he says, in all seriousness, he said, when we're working on the Insight book, I was working late. And here, she's on the other end of a large factory floor. But I mean, it was all remodeled, but you know how huge factory floors are. And so he's on the other side of the elevator that comes in the center. She's way down at the other end. And he hears a knock at the door. It was like 8 o'clock at night. And it was Debbie. And Debbie wanted to find out if he'd like a cup of tea. She was making a cup of tea for herself, and she said, I'd be more than happy to bring you a cup of tea. And I said, so? He said, that's why she wasn't getting the job. I said, why? I don't get it. He said, she was coming on to me. And he said, I don't want her to take this job. And I was astounded. I didn't show it. But I carry that to this day because I could see it. I could see it in my head. Memories said it. You cannot forget. With this man who was not particularly attractive, and she had a really attractive husband, a young husband. This was an old guy, probably not as old as I am now, but there was no comparing him to her husband. And he thought she was coming on to him, and he didn't want to have this situation. This was a foolishness, and it all ended okay for me, but not for her. And it wasn't many months after that they actually brought in a brother who was a mental health doctor. And I mean, he was truly, I wouldn't call him a psychiatrist, but he was a doctor, a physician. And 4 Bethelites who had mental health problems. And that was truly good. I was out of Bethel when I heard that they did that, because you have 4,000 people, and then you have like another 1,000 or 2,000. You had Patterson, you had Walkill, you had people coming out of your ears. I mean, people with all kinds of issues and problems and backgrounds. And even today, I hear that from an ex-JW who left Bethel not that long ago, a year or two ago. And he said that through the pandemic, many of the brothers and sisters were on antidepressant pills. And many were on alcohol too. And just people. And stresses are great. If you have any problems pre-Bethel, it'll only make it worse. And then when people there don't understand, and he or she was removed because of her behavior and was put to her husband by his side so he could watch her, how demeaning was that? There were so many psychological issues here that needed to be dealt with. And I ended up in the middle of that, but I came out okay. And when I got home here to Tennessee, I sent you the letter, didn't I? That about my the request that I do research for them. And the letter's very, very nice. And it comes from Cyril. And they asked me to continue my research, and I did. So I continued on until a letter is dated 1994. So I was doing that for over a year and a half. And they said, Cyril wrote, our research desk's new procedure of giving you subjects for articles the Society may publish in the future so that you could collect material on them is proving very successful. The writers assigned these topics are pleased to get all this information beforehand that you are sending us. We deeply appreciate you researching these, and you're keeping the requested subjects strictly confidential. Please continue looking for items on the top priority subjects we request. And then he puts in guidelines for certain things. So I continued in my work until I left, and we were asked to stay and my mother and father were invited to come to Bethel, and they would put them in an apartment. It was Joel Adams, Carl and Don's brother, Joel Adams, who was in the service department committee, and he asked us to stay. And he would never have asked us to do that unless he had clearance. And I told my mother and father we're New Yorkers, and they never wanted to go back to New York City. They loved Tennessee, and for their old age and in their ill health, they wanted to stay in Tennessee. So what she said, it wasn't true. After I finished my assignment in the art department with Nora's wife, Audrey, that I was brought down back onto. I could keep my office on that floor, but I would be working with the Awake group, doing research, and that's when I started writing for them. And I did a booklet that was released at the Assembly, and major. One of those big booklets at the Assembly in the 90s. I did that before I left Bethel, the last year I was there. And other things I did from home, I wrote articles from home. I wrote the one on difficult children. I wrote the article and worked on the article on women. Worked on the article on, I had discussions with Harry Poloyan, who was the Awake editor. And I would say from my past experience, I'm an experienced person who wants to share the good things with others. And I said to him one day, I think we put the emphasis so much on condemnation in our literature. We never do enough. That's all we hear as God's people. We just never do enough. I said, how about commendation? How about in the literature, commending all the work the members do? Well, I realized years later, no, this organization wasn't created for its members. It was created for an organization's existence and those that ran it. But the members never were of that great importance. Neither was Debbie that great importance. She can't fit. She got emotional problems. You got circuit overseers that can't fit, got emotional problems. They just disappear into the woodwork, you know?
Well, Barbara, that's exactly what happens. But I mean, that story really was a good story for people here to hear tonight. Now, I told you I wouldn't keep you much after an hour and a half. Can you take about 10 minutes and see if we have some people with some questions for you?
Surely.
All right. So why don't we do this? We got Barbara Anderson's on with us tonight. So if you got a question for Barbara, now she just told you all about the dirty dealings that go on in the writing department. What would you like to ask Barbara? Is anything about the writing department or anything you'd like to ask Barbara? You're on with us. Go ahead, speak up.
Barbara? Hello?
Yes. Hi.
Yeah, Kurt, I'd like to comment a little bit about your experiences in Franz's office. We all know he was supposed to be a leader, obviously, and an oracle of the Watchtower. So him having extracurricular books, I would call them, is not a big surprise. For example, Puritans, they were Calvinists.
Yes, Calvinist.
I don't know what he could learn from Puritans, but Russell had already rejected Calvinism.
Well, they hated the Catholic Church, so witnesses had something in common with Rutherford.
Oh yeah. We were. I don't have to tell you or Rick. We were encouraged not to look at any extracurricular.
Right. Exactly.
Bible commentaries and so on.
Yeah.
So, yeah, go ahead. You were going to say something?
No, same thing. And we were not encouraged to look at commentaries, and his office had commentaries. And so did the writing library, had commentaries of all sorts.
Right, yes. So I guess that's what I was saying. You would agree then that I remember Russell said something about to read his literature, if you read the Bible, studied it outside of using his literature, that you would be lost, confused in some way. I think that's been a trademark of the Watchtower all through the decades. So that was my point, I guess, the hypocrisy of some men that believe they have the ability to read the Bible and interpret it, and then others don't. So that, to me, would be a form of control over the group. And I guess you've seen this. That's about all I've got to say. I guess you've seen this and would agree with that, with the Watchtower, that they wanted you to read their literature along with the Bible. But some of the leadership, Franz would be an example here, did not actually stick to that himself. But anyway, thank you for taking my call, Barbara. Good program. Thank
you. That's a great subject. I could talk hours on that subject, and I won't right now. But, the organization from the very beginning, with Russell, it was a plan. He discovered the plan, remember? And then eventually, she had the plan of the ages. Well, eventually they started calling it purpose, and because plan, that doesn't fit. So the purposes of God, and so just like vindication of God's name went out the door. We said vindication for years, and all of a sudden it wasn't that you vindicate God's name; it's His sovereignty you vindicate. So always reading between the lines, trying to find a better way to put this plan. And when Russell went through so much negativity, his reputation was being ruined and everything. Well, you know why there was a big change in the name of the literature. The Dawn, the books were the names of the books became the studies in the scriptures, because the other books were. The names of it were connected with Russell, so they changed the names of the books, the 7 books. It's more than 7. I'm thinking of the volumes, but that's the way this group worked. But they're not alone, People who think that they have insight want everybody else to have that same, what they consider insight. I have to be very careful that I don't fall into this either, but I won't. Facts are facts.
Well, there you go. Facts are facts. Hey, listen, we got time for one more call for you, Barbara. Go ahead. Who'd like to say hello to? Go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
Hello?
Yeah.
I got a question. Did you say, I wasn't listening well enough at the time, but did you say that there were leather-bound volumes in Brother Franz's office?
Yeah.
What year were they?
From 1879, the factory did it, or they sent it out, and so he had up to that point, 90. He had the bound volumes bound in leather. I'll never forget that. That was, and gold embossing, mind you, too.
Yes, and on the pages too, on the edges.
Oh yeah! Oh, they were beautiful,
Okay.
and his Bibles too. The New World Translation, the big fat one, the green baby. That was also in leather, and I mean he had it all. It was nice. So I'm not critical of that. I'm just telling you.
No, you're good. You're good. Everything you're saying is fine. I was there at mid to late 80s at Bethel. But what I remember is they took us on a orientation tour of the writing department, and they did show us these very fancy Watchtower and Awake volumes. And one of the things they explained is that those volumes, one Watchtower, one Awake volume every year, would go to the Library of Congress, and they were specially bound. They were very fancy looking. That's why I asked what color were they.
Not.
Now, I've also been in Brother Franz's office.
Could be.
Under different conditions. Go ahead. What'd you say?
I say it could be that they were the ones that went to the office. They had they worked with any organization that they could move forward with for themselves as a big publishing house. They were players, I'll tell you, and they didn't hesitate to. I mean, not morally or ethically. And they do the same thing in Europe. You know, they got caught up now in Europe, and they make all these claims that they're the persecuted ones and they're the persecutors. And now in the European scene of human rights, Jehovah's Witnesses begin to see for what they really are. They play a role in giving the wrong impression. They did it in New York. They did it with the United Nations, and now and for years they've been doing it over Europe. You know, and they're justified. They feel justified.
I wanted to say that I've been in Brother Fred Franz's office. It was under different conditions, and it was probably earlier than the time you mentioned because he was still up and he was in his office at the time. I was touring with a brother and his wife. The brother had been at Bethel at the same time I was, and we were good friends. And I was touring with them the executive offices. And I remember Fred Franz, he showed us a whistle.
Yeah, I saw that.
Yeah, and he said it was Brother Rutherford's whistle.
That's right.
And he said that, yes, and he said that Brother Rutherford used to blow on that whistle, and his secretary would come into the office.
Yeah, well, they didn't have intercoms,
Right. That was my experience seeing Brother Franz's office. Yours is much more interesting.
Well, I was in his office when he was there. I had forgotten where his office was back then, but I had been in it years before with a tour, and like you, and so. But then I didn't know one floor from another. So when I was taken, my experiences that I related today, that it was, I didn't know from the 8th floor that Franz was on the 9th. But I was in there, and he got the whistle out, and he blew the whistle, and he's the one who told us that the desk was Russell's. Did he tell you that?
Yes.
Yeah. He's quite a card, wasn't he?
Let me say this. I can't end. Your experience is so special, and it's an experience the sisters generally did not have.
No.
And to hear you say, it was. I can't get over that you had an office. Did you have an office? And did you have the secretary working with you or anything when you had your office?
No. I could get that. I could get someone to do copy for me if I needed it, but I did myself. So, no. Right on the writing floor, we each everybody had a private office, and Debbie had a beautiful office, and I had a stinking office right in the middle of everything, and it was dark and dingy, and she had a great office right at the other side of the building. But then when I went to the 9th floor, that's when I got that gorgeous office. And I was living it up, boy. I thought Jehovah was really with me, height of conceit. But boy, it brought me down, though. This experience should. I look back, I laugh. It wasn't funny then. But the irony of it all, and I can look at the whole picture of humankind much clearer as I look.
Well, Barbara, we just lost the phone contact here. We're gonna get it right back. So, Barbara, let's just hold on for a couple of minutes. We'll get back in. We lose the phone contact every 6 hours here at the Six Screens. So let's get that right back on again. Just give us a second, and we'll be able to get you right back on. But boy, very fascinating. A lot of people calling in and writing in as well. We have one person's asking you if you knew Angelo Castazano. I can't quite see it. Did you
I
know
know.
him?
Yes, yes, I did.
You did, yeah. You
From
know,
New Jersey, I think.
yeah.
Sure. Hmm. He's very, very nice man.
Yeah.
Catanzaro.
Yeah, Catanzaro, yep.
Mm-hmm.
There you go. Yeah, that's he's asking that. You did know him, huh?
Oh, yeah. Joe and I both knew him very much so.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I haven't heard his name in years.
All right. We got Barbara on here with us right now. We got one more call for you, Barbara, and then we're going to cut you loose because I know you have many things. You get tired after a while, I'm sure. You're on with Barbara. Go ahead. Go ahead. I know the phone's a little disconnected there, so people probably are a little disoriented. But we get wireless caller coming in from 832. Go ahead, 832. You're on with us. Hit *6 on your telephone pad. Okay, let me make sure that people can hear.
And you know, the last thing I was saying to Barbara, that's such an exceptional experience for a sister to have at Bethel. That is amazing. Her experience is amazing.
Well, it is amazing. There wasn't many people, Zach, that actually had a position she did, but that's why I was so pleased to have her come on and talk about some of these situations that she was involved in. And Barbara, we're going to cut you loose. We're going to let you go tonight. We want to thank you so much, Barbara, for coming on and being with us.
Thank you for inviting me and for listening. I'm not doing this just to tell stories out of, classes, home or whatever. I'm doing this because you know how I feel about setting people free. And I heard it the other day where a man said, he said, nowadays, he said, you go up to Warwick and there's big walls around and big gates, and someone standing in a little house, a brick house, letting you go through the gates. You got to go talk to them before they let you in. Everything is under lock and key. And he said, oh, I love the old organization, Bethel. Everybody was so wonderful. You just could go to Brooklyn and go into the lobby and the great big beautiful globe there, and he said it was warm and friendly and whatever. Yeah, it was. And it's a different group. I just think that those who are still in it, that's fine if they're happy with it. Who am I to say to get out of something? But for those, especially the young people, it's an organization that traps them, and they never seem to survive. As they grow older, they don't survive well because educationally wise, they can't think and make choices as good as if they were allowed to when they're young. The control is terrible. Everybody's smiling, but they're controlling one another. It isn't healthy. And
it isn't healthy at all, Barbara.
I want the young people, especially who are born into this, to be free. If they want to be a witness, that's their right to choose. But give them a chance to choose. And that's the situation that's going on in Europe. There's been a lot of movement about this, about children being allowed to make decisions for themselves religiously instead of being indoctrinated, not just Jehovah's Witnesses, but all of them. So within balance, there has to be balance in this. And, Humans don't tend to be balanced in anything.
Well, we're gonna get balanced. We're gonna get you arrested here tonight because you're coming back in 2 weeks. You got a great program, lots of people coming in. So,
I got
Barbara,
more experiences. I got another one that
well, I know
it's
you and I
interesting too.
are gonna talk about that the next couple of weeks, and then you're gonna be coming on 2 weeks from tonight, and we have our Christmas party next Saturday night. So I
Are
know
you
you're gonna.
serving? Are you serving anything?
We are. So you come on into our Christmas party online, and you'll be popping in, and we have a bunch of other people as well. But thank you very much, Barbara,
You're
for being
welcome.
with us tonight. You keep waving that flag of victory. We're proud of
Okay.
you. Thank you,
Thank you.
Bob. All right. Well, there you go.
Another room.
That's Barbara Anderson. My goodness, you got to really. Hey, listen, I enjoyed that program tonight. That program was very, very good. And anyways, I'm glad you're with us, folks. Did you learn something tonight from Barbara? Boy, would I have loved to when I was getting out of the Watchtower. I would have loved to heard a conversation like that because, I mean, you're getting it right from the horse's mouth, so to speak. I mean, she was there. That's what Bethel's all about. You can hear what she's saying. It's dirty dealings in the Watchtower. She's going to be coming back on in 2 weeks. She's spilling the beans and she wants to be exclusive here on the 6 screens. You're not going to hear this anywhere else. She says, Rick, I want to put my footprints right here where people can come to grips with what it was like to be a Bethelite. Thank you, Barbara Anderson. Well, don't you guys go anywhere. We have got a pasta babe. She's coming up next. She's your favorite apostate, and she burns the midnight oil right here on the 6 screens. So stay with her. Stay with us, and she'll be on very shortly. Her name is Linda James, and we're looking forward to her program. Well, I hope you guys really enjoyed the programs tonight. I did, and I've been listening intently. We had, of course, Anne Marie on earlier. We're touched by the tentacles, and boy, she had some amazing callers coming in. And then we did our JW World News. We just heard from Barbara Anderson with her program on the 6 screens. Now, next Saturday night, we have got a great thing going. We got a Christmas party. So we'd love to have y'all come into our Christmas party. It starts at, around 7 o'clock next Saturday night. We're going to have some prizes. We're going to play some trivia games. We're going to play some music. And we're just going to have a gay old time here. And what I want you to do is, if you'd like to come in on screen, we're going to have a bunch of the people from the 6 screens popping in on video screen. We're going to let our hair down. We're not going to be beating up on the Watchtower too much next week, but we can all just jam around. It's like coming in and sitting around the couch, and we can all talk. So if you'd like to come in on video screen and just make a pop in and say Merry Christmas or Happy Holidays, you can do that. What you want to do is write me at jwworldnews@gmail.com, and you'll be able to come on screen with us and come on and just speak your piece. And you don't have to spend hours with us, just 5 minutes, 2 minutes, even if you want. Just come and say hello to us. Write me at jwworldnews@gmail.com, and I'll send you a link for next Saturday night. But don't expect the link until about 6 o'clock, 6:30 before the program. You won't get the link this week, but you'll get it before the program. I'll give you a link, and all you have to do, folks, in your email is just hit the link, and that'll bring you into our StreamYard, and we'll put you on film. And maybe you want to, show us your Christmas tree, or maybe you want to talk to us about how you celebrate Christmas or whatever. So we're going to do that next Saturday night. We're going to have a great time right here on the 6 screens Telenetwork. Well, we're waiting for a pasta babe. She'll be on here with us shortly. I do believe that she's getting ready here. I did send her the email. So
Hi, Rick.
there you are.
Hi, Rick.
Yeah, Linda, did you get the email?
No, can you please send me the link through Messenger, please? This one time?
Let's see.
Because you love me and I'm spoiled.
I don't know if I can do that.
That's
I don't know if I can. Let's see. Can you get it through Messenger? Let me see. So the other emails aren't working? I sent it to 3 emails.
Did you? Okay. Goodness
What?
gracious. I just dropped my water all over me.
All right.
It's going to be a good night, I can tell.
Yeah.
Okay. If you copy and paste it, that
Yeah,
would be helpful.
I did send it. Let's see what we got here. Let me get
I
in here.
appreciate it.
Let me see what we got going here. Let's see.
Thank you so much. Good thing I have more water.
All right, I just sent it to Messenger. See if you can get in from that.
Yeah, yep, I see it.
All right.
Okay, I'm going to grab a towel.
So
and I'll be right
if
on.
that works, then I'm just going to send it to you to the Messenger from now on, Linda. That'd be easier for you. Okay.
Okay. So I'm going to grab a towel because my floor is wet, and then I'm going to push the link.
All right.
Thank you for
All
putting
right.
it to me.
All
I'll
right.
be right back.
That's good. Okay. You're welcome. Okay. So anyways, we got Linda come on here very, very shortly with her burning the midnight oil here with, well, she's your favorite apostate. It's Healing After the Watchtower. That's the name of her program. So she'll be with us here very, very shortly, folks. But boy, I'll tell you what, I really enjoyed tonight's broadcast, and we're still on YouTube here. So, you guys are listening in. We have a great time here. We have a number of people. People wonder, well, how many programs do you have, Rick, on the Six Screens Telenetwork? Well, we got about 17 different programs, probably about 18 by now, 19 maybe. But different programs where ex-Jehovah's Witnesses, for the most part, do programs here on every Saturday night and then every other Sunday. Now, tomorrow, Sunday, we do have programs as well all afternoon. We start at noon. Now, come in and see us. Now, we talk about theological issues and spirituality. We don't talk about that on Saturday night. But if that intrigues you, or you're into the theological issues after leaving the Watchtower and wondering what witnesses do for spirituality when they leave the Watchtower, these are the things we talk about on Sunday. So we begin tomorrow at 12 o'clock. So why don't you join us? We have Chad coming in from Illinois. He'll be talking about cults. That's what he specializes in, cults. He'll be talking about Reverend Applewhite with the Heaven's Gate cult. He'll be talking about that tomorrow and finishing that up. But we have programs all Sunday afternoon, and you don't want to miss it. Come on in if you can tomorrow. We'd love to have you. Same YouTube channel and everything. So we're looking forward to it. Yeah, so I'm thankful that we're able to do this for going on 17 years. We never missed a Saturday night. And we're here because you are here. There's many people that really rely on this program where you can come in and you can enjoy company of other people who have left the Watchtower. Now, that's an important thing. That's a very, very important thing, that people can do that and enjoy the company of other apostates, so to speak, because it reinforces your thinking about the Watchtower. When you leave the Watchtower, at least when you first do, you're wondering, well, what if I'm leaving the truth? But when you come into the Six Screens and you hear all of these people talking, you just heard from Barbara Anderson, an insider, and she gave you the skinny. She let you know what goes on behind the curtains of the Watchtower. So when people hear all of this, it really reinforces your way of thinking, and you can be glad you left the Watchtower. And as of late, more and more people are calling in all the time. I'd say in the last 6 months, it's just unbelievable the amount of people that have been calling into the Six Screens. So why don't you do it? You guys can muster up the courage one of these times to come in and make a call. We put the telephone number up, but I can understand sometimes people are nervous that maybe their relatives will be listening in and they could get disfellowshipped or whatever. But when you can muster up the courage and come on, would really love that. Yeah, we've been having a good time here in the last 6 months, like I say, especially with all the new ones coming in. And I really can't emphasize enough that, we're going to have a lot of fun next week, because there's a lot of ex-witnesses that really on Christmas Eve, they're sad. They don't know what to do. And even when they were witnesses, they were sad. But you're going to have some good company here next Saturday night. So by all means, mark it on your calendar and be sure to come in. So let's see. We still got a lot on our radio network. We got a lot still listening in on the Six Screens video suite. We got people on Facebook.
Hey, Rick,
Yes.
can I ask a question?
Yes, Debbie.
Do you know what happened to Daniel? He used to always be on here and comment, and it's been a while since I've heard anything from him.
Yeah, we haven't heard from him in the last month or so, but maybe he'll come on tonight. But he comes on from time to time. He kind of takes a little hiatus and goes off and then comes back. But we'll see if he comes on tonight. It'll be nice to have him come on. Yeah, he's a good guy. We love Daniel. He's a good man. Yep.
Yeah, he's sweet.
Yeah, he's a good
But
guy.
He probably just comes on mostly at Linda James's program.
Yeah, it's hard. It's hard for people to listen into all the programs. I mean, I couldn't even do it myself, to be honest with you. I've been sitting here now for ever since 5:45 this afternoon. So when Apostle Babe comes on, I'm going to get up and walk around a little bit, get some fresh air, get a cold drink. We have no commercials here, so it's nonstop. On TV, people get commercial breaks. They get up, they walk around, but not complaining, just explaining. And that's why I say, who wants to watch TV with all the commercials? Geez, you're paying $200 a month for cable, and all you get is commercials on top of that. People can come into live streaming and no commercials. The continuity is never destroyed. When you're watching TV right in the middle of a suspenseful event, time for a commercial. But I mean, live streaming is taking over where TV used to be. And it's interactive too. What TV program can you get on and call in and talk? And so, streaming is really picking up a lot of momentum. I'm glad to see that we're getting a good crowd coming in here as of late. It's just been remarkable. So we're glad we got all these people coming in, and we're glad to even see people commenting on YouTube. They've been commenting all week long. So waiting for the program to come up on Facebook as well. So I'm glad people really, really enjoy it. So we're just getting ready for Apostle Babe to come on. She should be on here very, very shortly. And that would be good. And give me a little break here as we're waiting for her to come on. I'm looking forward to it. I want to get up and move around a little bit. Like I say, not complaining, but, sit down for, 6 hours and without really being able to do much of anything. And it kind of is nice to be able to get Apostle Babe on, then I can take a little break. I listen in. I got a little bed set up in my studio here so I can kind of monitor things. I mean, I can't, stay up. I was up early this morning, going over all the news. I try to come up with all the latest news in the Watchtower. I don't want to make it like reading yesterday's newspaper. So I come up right up to date with the latest news in the Watchtower. And that's what we do on JW World News. But that takes a whole day, friends, to put it together. And I'm talking to people all week long are sending me information. And, keep doing that. If you come across anything of interest, send it to JW World News. It's like a news clearinghouse here for what's going on in the Watchtower. So by all means, go ahead and do that. And I appreciate all the people that do send me information in. Thank you very much. It's really helpful to me as I do go over the news and report it here every Saturday night. Yeah, so it's great to see all of the YouTubers as well. They're getting more and more people clicking in. You get on some of these posts, some of these forums, and you see more and more people too that are coming in to write and learning about what's going on in the Watchtower organization. That shows you more and more people are leaving the organization. So I think it's all good. I feel very good to see that this many people are coming in here, but not only here, but they're visiting other YouTube sites as well. So we'll just wait a little bit longer.
Hey, Rick?
Yes.
I just wanted to say thank you so much for having this program for us, because people like me don't have anything to do on Saturday night, and this is the highlight of my life, is coming and being able to be part of your program. And like on Christmas Eve, I would be alone also. So this is really something special to a lot of us, and I just wanted to say thank you sincerely.
Well, you're very welcome. So yeah, come back in next Saturday night, Deb. We're gonna have a real good time here. I mean, we're gonna have. I'm really trying to make this a big extravaganza. We've got music, we got games, we got trivia. We're gonna have people come in, and you can watch it on YouTube. Different people that have been on through the years, and some of our hosts from the programs will be coming on and just jamming, just hanging around, jamming. Like we're all sitting around the couch at a party time. So that's going to be fun. I'm looking forward to it, and get some songs we'll play, and even we get some live singing going on. It's going to be wonderful, and I'm thinking that it's going to be a way to draw a lot of people in, because I'll tell you what, a lot of us ex-witnesses on Christmas Eve. I mean, Susan and I, my wife, we don't, my grandchildren don't live around here. Uh, we don't really. I would celebrate Christmas. I mean, I don't go out and get a big tree or anything. I would if I thought of if we had children, but there's just no need to at this stage of the game. But it's not that I don't believe in Christmas or celebrate it. But some people have different feelings, and we'll talk about that even next week on how people feel about Christmas. So, in different thoughts, you can do whatever you like. But the ex-witness, I mean, they are in a pickle to some degree. Many go out and, they celebrate and have a real good time. But I just couldn't. When I first got married to Susan here 9 years ago, and we went out to the Christmas tree shop and we got a little tree, but you just don't. I mean, the Watchtower put so much negativity and destroyed it so much through the years about Christmas that it's hard to really get the motors running on Christmas. It's like, how do I get this thing started? And I'm sure many of you guys feel the same way. So it's very awkward. But the Watchtower's hurt so many people. My goodness, that they've taken something that is so meaningful. Christmas, not only is it, we know Jesus wasn't born on the 25th. We know that. But I mean, just take the understanding of it all and put Jesus into it. But even beyond that, you're just getting together with your family and being able to be with them and have a meal together and hug them and wish them the best for the Christmas season and the new year. You can't do that even as a witness. Geez, I mean, they take the best of life and destroy.
Hello, Rick?
Yes, go ahead. Yes.
Hello, Rick.
Yeah.
This is Hitley.
Yeah, Hitley.
I just wanted to add to what you're saying, that I agree with what you're saying. It's gotten to the point with Watchtower that they don't want the witnesses, to the active witnesses, to that when someone gives them a gift for not only Christmas but for some other occasions, for them to refuse the gift and give it back to the gift giver, which is really insulting, And for many years when I was, an active witness, I have done that, and my conscience would bother me because I'm like, let's just say somebody would do that to me, that would be very, very, insulting and really to show bad manners and what have you. So Watchtower has gotten to the point that they even made the witnesses look like they're Grinches on Christmas, to make them look like they don't really care for any, revelry or any good times or any like that, any normal, enjoyment. That's all I wanted to say.
Well, Hitley, that's a mouthful, really. And it's true. The Watchtower, they rob people of such a joyous life. Right now, especially this year, I mean, people coming out of COVID, the inflation, the economic situation in this country stinks. People are having a hard time putting gas in their car, food on the table. And, to be able to get together with friends and have a joyous occasion, geez, you need that. Human beings need that. But who steps in the way and stops it? The Watchtower,
Hey, Rick.
Yes.
Hey, this is Gilbert. I just wanted to say, before you go, about Christmas, I just wanted to add this in. I want to tell you what I tell everybody when I talk to J-Dubs on the phone. And I say, make it your own. If you don't like Christmas or you have problems with this or that, it's like the truth is everywhere. And in Seinfeld, they had an episode where Costanza says, we'll have a Festivus for the rest of it. He made his own celebration. And that's what I'm telling you and everybody else. If you don't like something, that's okay. Make it your own. Make your own customs. Make your own traditions. And tell your kids, hey, you know, either keep our tradition or make your own.
Well, absolutely.
And that's what I tell people with Christmas.
You know, Gilbert, while you're on here, I saw a YouTube that you made back in 2016 about Merry Christmas, and I thought that was fantastic. I played the song at the end of my broadcast tonight. So I'm asking next week, if you're around next Saturday night, can you come in and join us a little bit? I'll send you a link. I mean, I don't know what you got planned. I know you're a big come in.
I'll do. And I'm this week I'm gonna post all the Christmas songs. We have a few Christmas songs.
Yeah.
And we'll post them all. And the funny story about that is there's a J-Dub, and all he wanted to do was be a singer, and he couldn't, but he finally learned the truth about the truth. And now he's happy because he's doing what he wants, and he wanted to sing.
Yeah.
And so all of those songs, you know, they're professionally done, and that's hopefully other people will be inspired to do the same thing and follow their dreams.
Well, let me just who was doing the singing on those songs you did? It came out so good. I mean,
his name was Joel Rivera, but he learned the truth about the truth, and he says, Gilbert, I'm gonna tune out, and I'm just gonna work on my. He has a band down in Laredo, Texas, and he just disappeared, and now he just plays music.
Well, I'll tell you what. I mean, let's play a little clip here. This is him evidently singing. Well, listen in. Listen in. Hold on one second. Why did that happen? Hold on one second. I don't know what's going on here. YouTube lately is driving me crazy.
Feliz apostata, feliz Navidad, feliz apostata, prospero año y libertad. I wanna wish when I pass in Christmas. I wanna wish when I pass in Christmas. I wanna wish when I pass in Christmas from the bottom of my heart. I wanna wish when I pass in Christmas. I wanna wish when I pass in Christmas. I wanna wish you a Merry Christmas from the bottom of my heart.
Well, I want you to come on next Saturday night. We'll talk about that clip. We'll play more music from it, too. It'll be great. If you have some other songs, bring them on with you.
Yeah, I will.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll Merry Christmas. Talk to you soon.
Thank you. Well, that's Gilbert Gonzalez. He'll be with us next Saturday night as well. What do you think of that? You want to wish you an apostate Christmas. It's amazing. Well, we're going to be going to... Yeah, yes.
Hi, thank you. Thank you for Gilbert saying what you said, Gilbert. And I'm so happy to hear Hidley. I haven't heard her in forever. But, you know, the thing about Christmas is just an example how the Watchtower will strain out the gnat and gulp down the camel. You can pick apart just about any tradition, any celebration, any little thing that people do, like wedding rings and weddings and how you eat cake, and if you have a dog they will pick anything apart just to destroy any minute amount of happiness that you might get from it. But yet, gulping down the camel, they will hide pedophiles, make excuses, and lie and twist the scriptures, and they are insane. But the whole thing, like Gilbert said, make it your own. A lot of people don't know that in the history of Christmas was started by Christians who were trying to get away from paganism. But then they were faced with the long, cold, dark, scary winter time where they're freezing, and they needed something to look forward to. And they came up with their own way of celebrating Christmas, like Gilbert said. Different ones had different traditions from their own nationality or their own background. Well, we did this, or we always had that, or we ate this, or we did it that way. Like in the Old West on the prairie, they didn't have trees. So they would go out and get a tumbleweed and they put it up and they decorate it with popcorn and paper little rings. And, you just do your own thing. And they made it their own. It's not a sin to have something that you put together and celebrate, because we need that. We're built that way. It's in our DNA to have something to look forward to celebrate, to come together with each other, to celebrate in joy and laughter and happy. Watchtower is always going against happy. They hate happy. I don't know why. Sex and happy, they have a problem with. Thank you, Rick.
Well, there you go, Anne-Marie. Well, thank you, Anne-Marie, and all the people that came in tonight on Barbara Anderson's program. We're now going to go to Aposta Babe. She's your favorite apostate. She's coming up next right here on the Six Screens Telenetwork. If you're on one of our platforms, YouTube, Facebook, stay with us. Stay with us. We're just going to end this program, but we'll be right back, and Aposta Babe will be with us. So let's end the program right